The other day I talked to Kate Dalley, and I thought you might like to hear our conversation.
Welcome to the Blaze Radio Network. This is The Kate Show, and I'm Kate Dalley, your host, and so glad to be here with you today. I have such an amazing guest, and I've wanted him on for quite some time. Lew Rockwell, welcome to the program.
Kate, great to be with you.
I'm so glad to have you. This is, you know what, you're one of my idols, and I'm going to say that just right off the bat so people understand how important you are and the work that you do. You are an American libertarian author and editor. I have LewRockwell.com, which has just so many viewers. I think people's heads would explode as to the caliber and quality of those that are contributing to your site. It's amazing. Also, you are the founder of the Ludwig von Mises Institute, and you've written the book Against the State, an Anarcho-Capitalist Manifesto. You've done some amazing work. You've done amazing interviews, and I appreciate you doing this because I think you're going to open a lot of minds today. I was talking earlier about the fact that I was fired from a Fox News affiliate for speaking the truth. Have you ever been in that position, Lew, and standing up for what you believe, and I'm sure it's gone against the grain? Have you had experiences like this in your own life, and what happened?
Well, I think we all have, but you know, what are you going to do? I mean, you don't want to. If you're just going to roll over for these types of people, why are you even alive? I mean, just forget it and, maybe go sell ice cream or something.
So true.
If you're in the world of ideas, if you care about things, if you're worried about the country, worried about the world, worried about children, grandchildren, worried about everybody decent and what they're facing now, what they might face in the future, you have to stand up for what you believe in. I mean, it's and all the great heroes that you and I look up to, they all did it. And sometimes it costs you money. Sometimes it costs you professional prestige.
Sure.
I'm thinking of Ludwig von Mises. Sometimes it even endangers your life, in his case, barely escaping from the Nazis just by the skin of his teeth. So, but he certainly never regretted sticking up for principle, and neither did Murray Rothbard, so many great economists, so many great libertarians, Ron Paul. So if you look up to people like this, if you seek to emulate them, then in your own life, maybe you can do something decent once in a while.
Oh, I so agree with that. Were you ever up against somebody that said, if you just change your tune a little bit, Mr. Rockwell, we can get the world is your oyster?
Well, I've been in cases where people just wanted me to moderate slightly. Don't be so radical. Just be a little more responsible, be a little more regular. Don't be so critical of the Republicans, for example, in that particular case.
Sure.
And, you're going to do very well with our magazine. You're going to be paid a lot and so forth. And I'm always glad to have anybody publish my stuff.
Sure.
However, I'm not glad to have them change anything, and I'm not certainly going to kowtow to them in terms of watering things down in order to get preferment. So that's, again, I don't understand what the whole purpose of your life is if you're willing to do that. Just makes you feel good to stick up for what you believe in. And if you're bothering the right people, that is the people who have not our best interests at heart, shall we say, right. That should be reinforcement for you. That's actually like a gold star in the first grade.
I agree with that. Everybody wants you to be just a little more, just a touch neocon. If you could just be a touch neocon.
That's exactly what was the case here, was that we're neocons.
Yes. I ruffled too many neocon feathers is what happened. And it always lends itself to money, and it always lends itself to the war machine, more money, wherever the money is going, the people want you to side with that. And it happens to be sort of the neocon. It's the far left, far right. It comes through a lot of directions. For you, when you were really diving in and looking at the big picture and the reality of what's been going on in our world, was it first realizing that the two parties were the same? Is that the catalyst that got you where you have become, or was it something different? What opened your eyes, Lew?
Well, I have to. This is a terrible thing to have to admit about myself. I used to be a Republican before going straight. So in my early days, I was involved in politics. I was, for example, a huge fan of Barry Goldwater. I took time off from college. I donated tremendous amounts of money for a college kid, worked, as hard as I could. And I later came to, even though Barry Goldwater said a lot of very great stuff, a lot of great stuff written in his ghostwritten book, The Conscience of a Conservative, written actually by the great Brent Bozell, not to be confused with his descendants with that same name. But I came to the conclusion he was in effect a neocon. He was, as I examined him, I saw that when he was at the 1956 Republican convention, he'd given a speech saying, look, if we're going to be successful as Republicans, we have to stop criticizing the New Deal. We have to accept everything that Roosevelt and Truman did and then move on from there. And after he ran for president, he just became a total neocon as a senator, a warmonger, and he's always a warmonger. But I mean, he became all the principles that he had espoused when he was running for president just disappeared. So I would say I was just a kid, but that was an eye-opening
I'll bet.
thing for me. So I continue to be interested in politics. But yeah, I mean, I think as Butler Schaefer always says, the Republicans and the Democrats are the two wings of the same bird of prey.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're very bad. They exist only to maintain the regime, to maintain, of course, even the rather lower ranking people in the parties and the party apparatus do very well financially.
Mm-hmm.
When you get at the Hillary Clinton level or something like that, of course, you're doing extremely well. And then you get up where it's Goldman Sachs and so forth, but that's not the highest level. Then there are people above that who are ultimately pulling the strings.
Yes.
They don't have our interests at heart. They just think of us as cash cows. We're just a sheep to serve them, and this is why they can't stand, for example, populism. They hate populism, whether it's on. And I'm not saying that I'm entirely okay with Trump, and I'm certainly not okay with Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
But they do stir up some interesting emotions among people. That is considered extremely bad form, because if you get people stirred up, why? Who knows what they might do? They might toss off the neocons and the other people who are really like fleas on a dog. The dog might start scratching,
Right.
And so they have this massive propaganda apparatus, whether it's on television, radio, in publishing, newspapers, digitally, Facebook, Twitter, all pretty much preaching the same line. I remember when the great open mic incident when Mark Zuckerberg
Mm-hmm.
is talking to Angela Merkel in Germany, and she says, you Facebook must make sure that anti-migrant sentiments are suppressed and don't get out to the public. And he said, we're going to do that.
Shame.
And of course, that's just one of the many things they suppress. There's been a little bit of attention to this recently about censorship, and this is, to the extent it's a private organization. I don't entirely know how much of a private organization is and what its tentacles.
Mm-hmm.
Who's got the tentacles? The state or Facebook, Google, and so forth.
Right.
But these companies are, how shall I put it, slightly close to the government for my taste.
I think their backing is. Yeah.
They're bad people,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very, very successful. Do well by doing bad. I don't think anything is ever lost. I think God always wins, among other questions,
I agree.
at the end of time. And it's up to us to do our best, to raise the flag, to fight the spiritual and the ideological battle, the economic battle,
Mm-hmm.
for the ideas that we know will bring about prosperity, that will promote civilization rather than de-civilization, and promote building rather than destruction. And I mean, this is what you do in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. How will Trump, if he gets this nomination, do you think, Lew? How will this play into the world government? He's been talking a good talk, and I know that in some cases he talks down and it makes sure that we, come together as a country, worry about the United States. I never believe campaign promises ever. And so where where do you see us as in a world government situation with Trump? How will he play into it?
Well, first of all, I must say many times I root for Trump, because I think on the issues that he talks about and that have never been talked about.
It's true.
I mean, the whole question of mass immigration, subsidized immigration, bringing in vast numbers of Somalis or whomever, putting them in Minnesota, Maine, Kurds. I mean, they're in because of this sort of immigration stuff, in the Nashville, Tennessee schools, public schools, they have to teach in 150 languages. I mean, it sounds it's crazy, but that's, so there's been a deliberate effort really ever since the 1965 Immigration Act from Lyndon Johnson and Teddy Kennedy and Hubert Humphrey, if people remember those names, to change the American population. And they certainly have been very successful at it. And it's for one, and the Republicans cooperate, by the way. It's not just a Democratic.
Sure.
Republicans are just as bad. Really, they're worse because they pretend to be something that they're not. The Democrats, not so much.
Right. Do you believe him?
Well, I want to believe him, but how can you, I always put Ron Paul in a separate category.
Me too.
You can't, how can you really trust somebody who seeks power over others?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something, St. Augustine talked about this. He called it the libido dominandi, the lust to dominate, the lust to rule, and how dangerous a trait that was. And of course, that's the political trait.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Trump is going to do something about the whole PC business, which is the cultural Marxism that's wrecking universities and wrecking so much of American life, wrecking careers and people. Whereas speech controls and just all all the stuff.
Yes.
So he's sound. He seems to be sound on that. He seems to be sound on immigration. I have hope. I don't think he's any worse. My guess is I don't think there's any question. He's better than on taxes than Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Karl Marx is better on taxes than Hillary. But it's I mean she's
true.
And I also think and hope. And I hope I'm not being a fool, but I think he's less belligerent. I think he's, especially with Russia, and China, he's less likely to start a world war. I think Hillary Clinton, who's the neocon candidate, is a very scary person, and we see this going on under Obama, sending ships and planes right up to the Russian border. I remember the U.S. being outraged recently when they were flying a spy plane over the big Russian submarine base that's, of course, in Russia. And the Russians didn't like it. And so this was denounced as Russian aggression by the U.S. because they sent out a plane to buzz the U.S. spy plane. Well, what would happen if the Russians had a spy plane over one of the big U.S. sub bases in South Carolina? Well, they'd probably kill everybody in the plane.
It's true.
So again, the U.S., as they keep telling us, is the exceptional nation. None of the rules apply to it. It makes the rules for everybody else, just like the government. None of the laws apply to the government. They get to impose the laws on you. So the U.S. empire feels it can impose its laws on others. When you're talking about a power like Russia or China, it's possible they're not going to put up with it. And I must say, if Hillary is the president, I fear a global war of the most disastrous, most frightening kind that would make what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as evil and horrendous as those events were, look like patty cake.
Oh, I so agree with you. I really do, because we seem to give ourselves a pass. We seem to buy into this American exceptionalism all the time, and that we have to be that whatever decision we make is the right one. We must check that at the door and say, no, we're not always going to make, or they're not always going to make the right decision in our name. They're doing things in our name, and we must be accountable and responsible for that instead of just giving them a pass to say whatever they do is right. And I think that's what the American people have done for more than 100 years. And if we don't change that, then we have a responsibility, I think, as Americans to recognize it. And I think maybe some doors are opening, maybe people's eyes are opening finally. But man, we've done this for a long time.
Of course, I think you're right. And I think it always helps to bring things down to the individual level. If we knew somebody, knew somebody in our life who said, I'm the exceptional man. I'm the guy, everybody has to look up to me. I make the rules. You better listen to me. We'd be heading out the door and going to the next town. You don't want anything to do with somebody like that. Yeah. So it's no difference when a state makes those kinds of claims. It should be alarming. Should be alarming to us. There's so many instances of. I remember when George W. Bush started his war of aggression on Iraq, which had done nothing to any American, killed at least 1 million civilians, destroyed the country, destroyed so many homes, businesses. Just a mountain of skulls, just horrendous. When he started the war, he had U.S. intelligence, great U.S. intelligence.
It's an oxymoron.
That Saddam Hussein and his sons were dining at some big restaurant in Baghdad. So he started off the war by bombing the restaurant. Well, they weren't there, but they killed all the waiters and the owner and the customers and the cooks and the busboys and so forth. If somebody in real life bombed a building because they thought there was a bad guy in there, they'd go to jail, and rightly so. They would be seen as a mass murderer. The government, of course, is never guilty of murder.
Right.
The government is never guilty of theft, no matter how often they put a gun to your head and say, turn your tax money over to us because we know how to spend your money better than you do. So, government is really is essentially a criminal organization that gets to do all the stuff that is rightly illegal and frowned upon in the private world. Because, of course, they're the exceptions. No, they're not the exceptions. And if anything, they're much worse people than the regular run of humanity. Again, because the people who are attracted to power, who think they should be able to have others under their thumb, who think they should be able to send others out to kill, should be able to kill others, these are not good human beings. And they're not the kind of people really we want running our lives, our families' lives. We certainly don't want them running our town, our friends' lives. These are just very bad people.
I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm not going to disagree with it. I remember reading the PNUC and how a year before 9/11, it was stating that we needed we needed to transform the military. We needed our exceptionalism, like over and over and over again. And as you read
we needed a new Pearl Harbor.
Yes. And if people
just
can't
by merest happenstance, yes.
If people can't read that and understand that we are the ones, we're the catalyst that gets this going. We are the ones that say, this is what's going to be done next. John Stockwell is one of my most favorite people coming out about the CIA because he really said it's team A, team B. They put in whatever team works. And then these teams, they dictate what's coming next. And we befriend a dictator, we throw a dictator out. That's what we do. We kill them. We befriend them, we kill them. We give them money, then we kill them. And we decide who comes and goes because it's who plays ball with us.
No, that's right. And again, people who are, much as we may enjoy a James Bond movie, there are plenty of people in the government who have, in effect, the license to kill. They can kill people. And how shall I put this? These are not Sean Connery types. They're a very nasty bunch. And, the only difference between them and the button men for the mafia is the mafia people are on a higher moral level.
I'm going to go with that, too. Lew, tell me about anarcho-capitalism. That you wrote your book on this. I want to hear a little bit about that, and I think the audience needs to know, what is that?
Well, the word anarchy, which of course we're taught to mean chaos, comes from the Greek for without an external government. And because there's so many people, there have been so many communists of a variety who call themselves anarchists. Murray Rothbard came up with the phrase anarcho-capitalism because, of course, we're all about the free market, private ownership, private business, and the functioning of the free market. And the government is just an external force. The great Lysander Spooner, who was an early conservative anarchist in the 19th century, wrote an essay, and he started off by saying, what's the difference between a congressman and a highwayman? He said, the difference is the highwayman doesn't request that you call him the honorable.
Ouch. Wow.
So these people are, just think about, we all look down on politicians, rightly so. These are we think of them as liars. We think you can't trust what they do, and they do a lot of very bad stuff. Yet we're taught from our earliest days, if we're go to the government schools or just in the air otherwise, that people in our private lives, we're so narrow-minded, we're probably nasty, we just don't know what to do. Thank goodness we have the government that only cares about the national good, the common good, the national defense, and all this stuff. The government is a separate entity, a parasitic entity that lives off the rest of us by force, by coercion, by propaganda, and we don't need it. Now, of course, there are aspects of what government does that we do need. We need defense, for example. We need policing. We need courts of law. But it has been shown many times in human history, even though we don't learn about that in school, that not only doesn't have to be done by the government, it's essentially a huge problem if the government is doing it. Because what we do is we set up this institution, the government, that gets to decide on its own how much of your money they're going to take, how much control they're going to have over you, and how much work it's going to do for the things it's claiming to do, like protecting you. Well, as happens with any monopoly, they do less and less work, grab more and more money, and exercise more and more control. They love putting people under their thumb and crushing them. It's a terrible thing. There are people who have these kinds of incentives and these kinds of values in life, but there are people like that. And it's always been the traditional interpretation of the temptation of the Lord, and the devil offers him political power if only he'll bow down before him. And all the early spiritual writers said, well, of course, this is because this is within the devil's gift, political power. And I think that's right. This
Yes.
is not a good thing. It brings on wars. How many millions of people has the U.S. government killed in its career of wars? We're like the Romans or the Babylonians and the British. We've killed, the government in our name has killed so many people, maimed so many people, crippled so many people, impoverished so many people, and of course put so many in the ground. Just millions and millions of people who most of the time have not done anything to us. Even if they seem to strike the first blow, it's because the U.S. has egged them onto it and connived them into doing it. So the U.S. goes, oh, you hit us, now we have to, kill every one of you, bomb all your homes, burn your cities down, and so forth.
In your view, when was the last time we actually fought for freedom?
When was that? I mean, I think there were aspects of the American Revolution. I think that was about it. There've been other instances of rebellions in the country that have been for attempts for freedom, tax rebellions in early Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, where people refused to pay the gigantic taxes the government sent in the troops,
right,
and killed them. So that's every single thing you have a dealing with the government, they're threatening to kill you. I don't care whether it's a library fine, parking ticket, or anything more than that, of course. They claim, and it's in the little fine print there, if you don't do what they tell you to do, they claim the right to really, to arrest you, to jail you, if you sufficiently resist, to kill you. So what kind of an organization is that? I mean, can you imagine a private organization, whether it's a church or a charity or a fraternal group or a sorority or people,
exactly,
companies or whatever, they do not. The late Joe Sobran always somebody had said, look, the General Motors, this is the old days, it's just like the government. And he said the difference between General Motors and the government, he said, the government makes me pay for a car and I don't get it. He said, General Motors, if I pay them for a car, I'll get the car, but I don't have to pay them for the car. They can't come to my house and say, we're ordering you to buy a car. So that's the difference between government and the private sector. So in private business,
point,
which serves customers, has made our lives so much better. Whether you look at simple things like a dishwasher, which relieved so unbelievable horrors and washing machines of what women had to live through before those inventions. It's just a touch of just how magnificent the free market and the capitalist system is, which of course is strangled by the government, manipulated by the government, misused by the government, and there are bad people in business who seek to use the government to advance themselves. So that's, there've been the Rockefellers and the Goldman Sachs, and so there are. But again, if you didn't have the government, the bad people couldn't do that. They would have to just try to serve the customer, the best prices, the best goods, the best service. That's what we want. So on one hand, you have people who would like to do good for you, but you're not required to obey them. And then you got another bunch who claim they want to do good for you, but they've actually always got a knife in their hand ready to stab you if you don't kowtow to them. I know we're all taught that the guy with the knife, the guy with the gun, pointing it at our head and ordering us around, the guy in a military uniform, the cop uniform, the bureaucrat's blue suit, we're supposed to think those are wonderful people. Those are just what we need. That it's been ordained by God and so forth. Obviously, I don't think that's correct. we have to obey the Constitution. No, wait a minute. Kate, my guess is you didn't sign the Constitution.
I didn't.
I didn't sign the Constitution. And even the Constitution, which we're taught to revere, was actually a coup, a centralizing coup by Hamilton and the other Federalists against the far more libertarian Articles of Confederation. That just one example that with the new federal government, they wanted to make it possible to raise taxes. Under the Articles of Confederation, every single state had to agree to a tax increase before it could happen. And the Hamiltonians there and all these people were complaining that that was a terrible thing. It kept the government weak and small. Well, you know what? If we have to have a government, we want it weak and small. We don't want it strong and dominating. But of course, that's what the Constitution tragically helped give us. And we all are taught to love the Constitution, but the actual history of it is unfortunate. Like every other government document, Hans Hermann Hoppe argues that every single adoption of a constitution in world history has meant a step up in government power, a step up in government centralization, under the lie that the government is being restrained.
You had mentioned in an interview some time back that Madison was explaining to a fellow centralizer that he picked the least damaging 10 items to send as the Bill of Rights. So that means there were more restrictive ones. What is in us that dictates or demands that we have a government authority always over us? What is it in us? And does libertarianism fight against human nature, the very human nature that says we need an authority figure? Right. It was attacked from the very beginning. And so what is in us? Lew, what do we have to change in order for people to grasp the two-party system, to grasp that we do not need all of this authority in our lives? What do we have to change? Because we seem to demand, is it human nature that dictates and demands for an authority figure always to have to look to, is it displacement of responsibility? What is it?
Well, I think that authority, voluntary authority, natural authority is, yes, absolutely a human desire. I think that whether it's the authority of a father or a mother in the family, whether it's the authority of the business owner who employs you, whether it's the authority of the head of the Rotary Club that you belong to,
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. What government does is they take this perfectly natural and normal device of human civilization and social cooperation and turn it to their own nasty use. So I think there is a desire for legitimate authority, again, voluntary authority, in private situations. But I don't think, despite, we are a fallen race. So there are bad things that result from that of many different sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it easy for the government to take that desire for people to respect a voluntary authority, whether it's God or certain things on earth, and they manipulate it, they distort it, they lie about it, and they appeal to people's good natures and they appeal to people's evil natures. So there are of course some people who like killing,
Mm-hmm.
and they like war, and but they're able to fool a whole lot of other people into joining in, a lot of times because they can't get a job otherwise. And as we know, when these kids come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, why, by the way, is the U.S. still occupying Iraq?
Well, poppy fields? I don't know. It has to be poppy fields, Lew. I don't know.
Well, that's definitely the case in Afghanistan.
Yes, Afghanistan, sorry. Yes.
But if you're going to have an empire,
Mm-hmm.
there's always a desire for jobs in the colonies.
Sure.
Because that's the way to wealth and power and so forth. So that's another reason they do it. But it's so they can lure people into the military. But I think it's a wonderful thing that really the vast majority of us are not designed to kill.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we have to kill in self-defense, even if there's some criminal creep breaking into your house and he's got a knife and you're a lone woman in the house and he's after you, of course you can shoot him to keep him from stabbing you.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you're never the same. I mean, it's not good for us to kill somebody, even in that kind of a situation, let alone to be busting into somebody's house in Fallujah, Iraq, and machine gunning, and oh, it turns out it was not the house of, Muhammad so-and-so. It's just a regular family, and I killed the children. This has happened again and again, and these men come back haunted. Too often they commit suicide.
PTSD.
This is it's just they're of course victims too, not the ones, not the leaders, not the guys who design this and engineer it, the CIA and
Right.
all the other federal agencies of that sort. But there are millions and millions of victims. The state is mankind's enemy on earth. I think it is the worst earthly enemy of mankind, and it just requires a little bit of reading. I so recommend, and by the way, this is on lewrockwell.com for free. You can look at it. Murray Rothbard's essay called The State.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about, and by the way, Rothbard is one of the great writers ever. So
I agree.
this is not a chore. You just start reading him and you're going to be drawn in. It's not, you think, oh my gosh, I got to read this. No, you don't. That will not be your reaction. You read this, you will never, ever see the government in the same light again. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with everything that Kate and I are talking about, but it does mean that you will have a different view. The scales will fall from your eyes, and you'll see things truthfully.
Right.
And that's that's very important for our own well-being and for our own lives in every sense.
I agree with you. I think people confuse patriotism. They confuse it with this, whatever we do is right. Let's go get them. Let's show them who's boss and let's show them who's in charge attitude. That is not patriotism. Patriotism is knowing or understanding what a limited role government should play. And then the government being able to fulfill just that very limited role and not going beyond its power. Patriotism is not rooted in any of the right things. Patriotism right now is rooted in this we are the bigger and badder. And I know we've alluded to this already and talked about it, but I wonder if people truly get that, if they ever will truly get that we've been sold a box of rocks when it comes to what patriotism actually means and what it is. I would rather know the truth of my country. I would rather know what they're doing so that we can change it than have my patriotism be built on a lie that we must always be in charge of everything that we do. And when we go out, we need to be the top dog. Nothing in the Constitution says we need to be the top dog. We were only supposed to defend our country. That was it.
Well, patriotism is another example of how the government takes a natural virtue and corrupts it.
Yes.
So what is patriotism? Patriotism is the natural human love of our home, where we grew up. The people
our ideals,
whether it's the town
morals,
or
ideals.
Yes, and also the landscape and the history, and we all naturally love that. What they've done is they've taken that and said, no, you must love, be responsible to, and have your ultimate loyalty to. And they always want the ultimate loyalty. They're very the state is a jealous God, and it allows no other gods before it. So they want your ultimate loyalty to be to that group of crooks and clowns and criminals that we call Washington, D.C., and their extensions over their tentacles all over the whole world. That's what we're supposed to love. That's what we're supposed to bow down before, rather than loving your home. And it's maybe it's your state, maybe it's the town you grew up in, maybe it's you just love the Rocky Mountains or whatever. You love the American people. You love the people you grew up with in the city or a little town you grew up in. That is normal, natural, human, civilized. But the government takes that civilized impulse and decivilizes it, that's just another example of how the government corrupts everything it touches.
I so agree. Lew, how do we go from what you've referred to in your book as the late stages of fascism back to an anarcho-capitalist system? What does it take to get back to that? You just mentioned the states. Does it take sovereign states? Does it take us pulling out of the union? Does it take sovereign citizens? In your estimation, what is it going to take?
Well, I think it takes, first of all, seceding. I think it takes, people who say homeschool their children. And by the way, as if people needed another reason to get their kids out of the public schools. This whole bathroom business, which is like something out of a dystopian novel, which is intended to corrupt. It's intended to abolish innocence, like so many of the other things that go on in the public schools. Fathers and mothers, get your kids out of these public schools. So if you can secede from the public schools, whether they can go to a good private school, religious school, be homeschooled. Unfortunately, people think, well, the public schools are free and, you should get what you can for free. But the public schools are not free. There's a high cost extracted out of your children's lives and souls and brains and spirits. That's not a price parents should want to pay. So I think that's just one thing you can do. And the extent you can secede from the culture in your home, there's so much, there's a lot on television that no children should be seeing.
Right.
A lot of parents just junk the television for during all the susceptible ages of their children. Everybody has to make their own decision, but there's so much, evil and corruption in the culture after it's been governmentalized that, and then of course, if you can, one of the worst aspects of big government is the centralization. It's actually absolutely essential to the growth and the empowerment of big government that it be highly centralized. So that's, of course, that was not the original American idea, or so we were told. That was actually the Hamiltonian idea. They did have that idea, but certainly that was not in the Federalist Papers and the other propaganda that was used to get the Constitution adopted. But anything that moves towards decentralization, things like, say, states in the West against the federal drug war legalizing medical marijuana. Again, why should somebody? I mean, we know that Ron Paul has talked about this and so many others. We know, for example, that medical marijuana is very helpful to people with cancer.
Right.
And it may even be massively helpful to people with cancer. At the very least, it keeps many people with cancer actually die from starvation because they just can't eat. The nausea is so intense. Medical marijuana fixes that. So that's just, but again, I don't care whether it just makes your nose turn blue or whatever. If you want to use it and you're dying, let alone if you're dying, who are these creeps in Washington to tell you?
Exactly.
Who are they? They're like the evil clowns out of a Stephen King novel or something.
Well, it's our choice.
Well, of course,
right?
It should be our choice. That's right. It should be our choice. We should have freedom of choice, which they're always blabbing about, but of course, we don't actually have it. So anything that helps nullify federal edicts, whether it's a sheriff, a county, a state, this is all tremendous talk of forming of a new country. And, the state of Jefferson, there are people in the Pacific Northwest who want to secede from the U.S. Of course, the Southerners still want to secede. People in New England would like to secede. And as the government keeps inundating us with foreigners on welfare, foreigners who are privileged by affirmative action, foreigners who have many more rights than any American has, I think there's going to be more and more reaction. I don't think it's ever too late. But the most we can do, first of all, is focus on ourselves and focus on our family and what you can do for yourself, which is absolutely essential to everything else, as well as educate yourself.
Yes.
There are certain things you should read that can just, again, help you understand why government regulation of the economy, government intervention in the economy is so horrific to your standard of living, how much poorer you are than you would be in a free market, and how you're being ripped off by these people. It's not just a question of economic error, although they are preaching economic error, Keynesianism and so forth, but it's actually a ripoff because some people do very well from the system. The rest of us get ripped off. So if you're sick of being ripped off, you need to learn a little bit of economics. By the way, if anybody wants to email me at Lew Rockwell at mac.com, Lew Rockwell, L-E-W Rockwell at mac.com, I'm very, very glad to give them a short reading list. And I'm not going to stick you with a library full of books, although nothing.
Oh, but give us a few, though, because people email me all the time and they say, I'm just opening my eyes. Where do I start? So what would you tell somebody that's just opening their eyes to all of this?
Well, in economics, it was written in the late 1940s, but it still is the great book, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson.
Yes.
It's understandable. It's clear. It's one of these works, you read it and you will never see the world the same again. You all of a sudden understand when the government is advocating certain things, when bad economists are advocating certain things, just how disastrous that is. And we still, of course, have the economics of John Maynard Keynes, the man who proclaimed himself an immoralist. He believed in that morality was evil, and he dedicated his life to what he called immoralism. I am Moralism. So do you want? I mean, it seems to me that's all you need to know about John
Right.
Maynard Keynes. But his economics were very, very bad. In the introduction to the general theory published in Germany under the Nazis, he said, really, my ideas are best suited to an economy like National Socialism. That they're, and of course that's true.
Hmm.
They're not suited to a free people or a free economy. They've done horrific damage. So there's just so many great small works by Rothbard. What has government done to our money, which talks about money in American history, how the government manipulates it, how they've wrecked it for the benefit of the big banks, the benefit of the government, the benefit of the special interests, why they do it, how they do it. And again, Rothbard is so clear, so compelling, so interesting that you will find yourself just smoothing through it. So I'll send you a list of a few things in terms of war, in terms of government, in terms of economics, and a few other areas that a lot of this stuff, by the way, for free online.
Hmm.
So you don't even have, I think it's always great to have these things in your home, in your library for reference and as an example to your children and so forth. But you don't actually have to, but the vast majority of these things you can read for free online, which is, of course, one of the great developments in the history of civilization that we're able to do that.
I agree. Well, I've said before I'm on my daily show that Keynesian economics is sort of like Clinton writing a book on monogamy. It's about the same. It would be about the same. I mean, he does that much damage, I think, to that subject as Keynesian would. And the Austrian School of Economics, people really do need to understand this. They do need to understand these concepts. When people are starting to open their eyes to see what's really going on, I think the two-party system is important, valid, that they need to understand how much of it is the same goal. They might have a couple of different moral or social issues that are different, but it's very much the same. And also what we have done in our name as well, and what the government's done throughout the years, and that it hasn't been great. Our school system, you mentioned that, and I wanted to hit on that for just a minute. I am definitely against Common Core and against No Child Left Behind, and all of the things that we've done in the system. And to take our kids out of the system, I think, is probably the number one thing that we ought to be looking at doing as a nation to save our youth. Because what did Hitler say? You say that I cannot have your children. I already do. They're in our schools. Nothing can be further from the truth. We have them in our schools. And just because you know a nice school teacher doesn't mean that they are not teaching and preaching a system, a history that's been wiped clean by the foundations in America, but that have done their work, where we think that they're doing this great nonprofit stuff. Forget about it. They're doing a lot of the wiping clean of history. But it's been amazing. Hasn't it amazed you, Lew, over the years to see the school system and how they have this centralized authority and how much bigger it has gotten?
No, and of course, just one of the many lies is, oh, the poor teachers, they're overworked, they're underpaid, they're barely scraping by.
Right.
Public school teachers, like every other government employee, make far more than the taxpayer. They make far more than the median government employee. Public school teachers are a perfect example than the parents. And but yet we're supposed to believe that, oh, they're underpaid, poor babies. No, they're not. They're just like the rest of, vast pensions. And I noticed that the state of New Jersey is apparently about to pass a constitutional amendment similar to what Illinois passed, saying that the first job of the government in all its financial affairs is to make sure that the pensions of government workers are paid. That must take precedence over every single other thing. And of course, they're going to, it's happened in Illinois, vastly raise taxes so that from all the people who are the taxpayers, and give it to the people who are not the taxpayers. By the way, government employees are not taxpayers. Every single dime they get is somebody else's taxes. They may take a little bit of that and give it back, but they're not actually paying taxes as somebody else's taxes. So they're just parasites. And even though there are decent people teaching, there are decent people working in the post office, there are decent people in all realms of the government, but the institutions themselves are corrupt, dangerous, threaten all of human life on Earth. Professor Robert Higgs gave a great speech at the Mises Institute once about, he thought the U.S. government was the first time in history where we had an entity both capable of and maybe oriented towards actually ending life on Earth. starting the kinds of wars that would actually bring life on Earth to an end. So these are, the neocons and so forth. These are people who are not driven by warm human emotions. They're driven by hate, by death. It's like a death cult.
I agree. When I look around and I see all of the people that are doing their jobs, just doing my job, and they're being told by an authority figure that they have to just do their job, it's frustrating to me because I wonder where the conscience has gone in a lot of people, or why we buy into this authority like we talked about before. And you've talked about the fact that, there's a lot of propaganda. We are a propaganda nation. We believe in everything the media tells us. If the media tells us marijuana can't do anything except it's just bad, we'll believe it for years and years and years. If they tell us that the school system, our kids have to be in public school to get a good education and we're just stupid and we're not keeping up, we believe it, even though that's not the truth. How do you see through the propaganda so that you're not one of those people that says, I'm just doing my job, when you're asked to do something pretty deplorable?
Well, I think you have to, it requires introspection. You have to look into your heart and your mind. And again, I think you have to do some reading. You have to read a few things, not a whole, again, it's not a gigantic stack of books by any mind, by just a short stack of little publications that would, first of all, mean far more than probably anybody else in your circle. That mean, by the way, Albert Janako always used to make this point. This is the best way to influence others, not to go out and grab them by the lapels and try to talk them into something, but to yourself become knowledgeable. And once people realize you know what you're talking about, that you know things, they will come to you. And so that's that's the way to do it. That's in fact the only way to do it.
I agree. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, so I think we live in perilous times. Maybe this has always been true of human beings. But we live in a time when we have, the U.S. government is the biggest, richest, most powerful government in the history of the world by many magnitudes. Stalin and Hitler didn't tell you how big your toilet tank could be, for example.
That's so true.
And there's so many things that we just accept. Oh, well, it's the government's telling us. They
micromanaging.
Know best. But that's what they want. And who was it who said the other day that in 1984, the novel 1984, was not supposed to be an instruction manual? But of course
isn't that the truth?
Orwell, and Huxley and these guys, of course, foresaw what was coming.
Yeah.
So
sure did. They sure did.
But we still have free will. We can still think. We can still care. We can still try to be the best people we can be, and that involves not bowing down before Moloch. So these people in the government, I mean, think of them. They're the abortion champions of the whole world, and I mean, they're now instituting through Medicare, which I would guess is no surprise, a plan of euthanasia to try to get old people to agree to kill themselves for the betterment of the government, right? So, of course, the government is in essence a death cult. They revolve around war and again abortion and euthanasia.
And the propaganda has been incredible lately as far as pushing this idea of just celebrating the fact that people can just take a demise pill and just go off into the sunset after a grand party at 75. They're worthless. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? It amazes me how the propaganda starts and how they get people wrapped around an emotional idea. They sell them on it, and it could be the most deplorable idea. But if the media is using emotion to get you there, they get you there. And that's what we have to be alarmed at and aware of constantly.
No, we do. And of course, if you stop to think about it, you realize how crazy it is. I mean, I can remember the euthanasia doctor, Dr. Kevorkian, who was portrayed in the media as he's a kind man. He's a good man. He's a compassionate man. He's just helping people to die.
Right.
And he really liked his work. He loved his work.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah. Okay. This is I mean, it's and of course now we have, and maybe it's always been the case, but the government openly celebrating torture. And what's ahead? I mean, if we don't stop them, they're going to feel free to torture you if they feel you're not paying your taxes, to tell you
so true,
to get you to. I mean, nobody should feel these things are morally beyond them.
But a government without a conscience can't teach a conscience to the people. So we keep looking at them to have a conscience, but they never will they?
Well, no, the government is actually the conscience abolition force.
Yes.
I mean, that's what soldiers are taught. There was a horrendous uproar in the military after World War II when a study showed that some high percentage of foot soldiers, when they had an enemy soldier, quote unquote enemy soldier, in their sights, didn't shoot him. So the government was just horrified. And of course, as all the great anti-war poetry and so forth, I mean, some poor schnook has also been drafted, who's got a family, got a parent, a mother, a father, a wife, children maybe, and is not your enemy. In fact, maybe you're over in his country, killing him. And so people didn't go along with it. So there's a huge study at West Point and in the Pentagon and all these institutions to try to abolish the conscience so that you will kill people you don't know, you've never had anything to do with, upon instruction. You will upon orders, kill them. Herbert Spencer got into trouble in Britain in the late 19th century, the great libertarian philosopher, when he said, that people are being asked to go kill people upon order that they don't know anything about, and some other guy orders them to kill them, to murder them, and they're supposed to be okay with this. Well, it's not okay. It's not, again, just think of, always bring things down to your own life, your own knowledge, your own situation. If somebody claimed to be able to tell you to shoot the next door neighbor, he's a bad guy and he's threatening you, isn't there there's something funny about that at the very least.
Should be.
So, and our brothers and sisters in other countries, they have a right to life. They have a right to raise their families. They have a right to have their children and have a safe home and do everything they can to improve their living standard through voluntary means. But no, we're taught to hate their guts. They're all evil. All the Iranians, they have to be nuked. They're horrible. They're not obeying the U.S.
Right.
They overthrew the U.S. installed dictator. How dare they do that? And so they're all, the enemy to be killed. So this is, government is really a very nasty operation, but a little bit of thought and a little bit of reading, a little bit of introspection just opens your eyes, and it's very good to have your eyes open.
I agree. And I really appreciate you coming on this show. I really do. I think you've opened a lot of eyes today. And I think people will be clamoring for those books, which is really good. We've got to get people to see. I liken it to wrestling. Once you know that wrestling is fake, you start to see it all. You can't unsee it. So hopefully more people will understand that concept and get to that point where they see that it's fake and they go, I got it. And so I really appreciate you. LewRockwell.com for some of the best commentary you'll ever read. Thomas Sowell, all kinds of people come to your site and you publish them. It's amazing. I just appreciate the work that you do, Lew. Thank you for standing up for what's right.
Kate, thank you, and congratulations on your new show. May it expand and have ever more influence. You're definitely one of the good people.
Oh, thank you, Lew. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Until next week, this is The Kate Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
Well, thanks so much for listening to the Lew Rockwell Show today. Take a look at all the podcasts. There have been hundreds of them. There's a link on the LRC front page. Thank you.